Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about Volkswagen and reliability. Welcome back and thanks for being here. My name is Scott and I've crossed a milestone. My GTI now has 150,000 miles, and that's no surprise to those of you who watched my 5-year anniversary a few months ago when I was at 143,000 miles. Now, I can't tell you how many comments I've received on my various videos about how unreliable Volkswagens are. They're junk. The Asian models are better. And I've also read plenty of accounts of Volkswagens with premature problems. So I'm not ignoring the fact that some cars have problems. But I have to say, I haven't had the same experience with this car or any of my other ones. I've owned 8 Volkswagens since 1995, and only one was problematic, and I'll talk about that one in a minute. Before I talk about reliability, I'm inclined to mention what reliability in a car means to me. And there was a time when it seemed that reputable automotive publications would rate their reliability score on how many times a car returned to the dealer during its warranty period. And their scores didn't seem to distinguish the difference between a faulty door speaker and a blown head gasket. And there's a big difference between the two. Each visit, large or small, could count against the reliability score. Now, some of that bias may be a result of consumers who are nitpicky, maybe they're irritated, and therefore they skew the surveys. I don't know. Still, I mean, even this car had a problem with the lighting in the passenger door here, and I didn't notice that until the first time I drove in the dark. And that required a trip back to the dealer, and they replaced the entire door card. Now, that was covered immediately under warranty. Was it inconvenient? Yeah, it was, and that loaner car just sucked. But I wouldn't consider that a reliability problem. Personally, I rate reliability on whether the car starts and drives every time I push that start button. In this car's 150,000 miles, it has never left me stranded. Sure, I killed the battery a few times, but each time was my fault and easily remedied because I've got the jumper pack in the car. And yes, 2020's injector hiccup and water pump leak, they were inconvenient repairs and kind of expensive as well, but the car started and drove just fine. So even though I've had some repairs, I don't think any of them are a ding against the car's reliability. Now, if repairs like that were a routine problem that were both expensive and kept the car in the shop frequently, then I would consider the car to be unreliable. After all, the car's availability, that plays into my metric as well. So if the car is not at home, then I cannot push the start button, right? So right now, I think the car is in fantastic condition, and it really always has been. And I have no reservations about taking it on road trips. In fact, I just recently made a blast to Florida, which was around 1,400 miles round trip. I hope to fill in the rest of this map soon. I'm hoping to go to the West Coast this summer. So yes, a car with 150,000 miles might have a problem on its next road trip. I hope it doesn't, but let's face it, nothing lasts forever. I just hope if something breaks, I'm close to home. Repairs are a hassle and potentially more expensive when you're away from home and away from familiar resources. Have I been lucky with this car? Well, if so, I've been lucky with all of my Volkswagens, all but one. The only one that gave me significant problems was a 1989 base model Golf that I bought in 1995 as a wholesale trade-in. It had been driven by a young father while he was putting himself through medical school. Translation, it was neglected. All of my other Volkswagens were fantastic. My '98 Jetta TDI was famous in its time for having 445,000 miles at 17 years. And I sold that car due to body rot in critical areas. It was a common problem with the Mark IIIs. The engine had never been opened, compression was great, and the new owner bought the whole car just so he could swap the engine and transmission into his Passat. Will this car be as durable? That's hard to say. The body construction is certainly better with all the galvanizing and dipping and all the stuff they do during manufacturing, but time will tell if the engine and the variety of plastic parts throughout the car suffer later in life. And speaking of later in life, my experience with cars has shown that most problems happen as a result of time, not mileage. Plastics get brittle and rubber parts crack after about 10 or 11 years. Maybe today's plastics will last longer, I don't know. I was pretty good about staying ahead of the plastics and rubber on my older cars, so let's see if I can do the same with this car. Now, I can already hear the Toyota owners clanging away on their keyboards. Make no mistake, I think Toyota is a benchmark for reliability. Lexus too, possibly even more so. And probably some other Asian makes as well are pretty reliable, although I think maybe to a lesser degree. You other guys just bang away about how Toyota's not as good as your car. But search your area for Toyota or import repair specialists, and I'm sure you'll find plenty. Those places would not be in business if the import cars never broke. So, I mean, look, Toyota and Volkswagen, they trade back and forth regarding which is the world's largest automaker. So it's logical that the brands with the most products on the road are going to have the most vehicles in repair shops. That has to be a statistical fact, right? Or is it? I don't know. I'm not a statistician. So where does my luck come from? What are my tips for a long, happy car life? Well, first, drive gently until the engine is completely warmed up, and don't warm up at idle. Even on icy days, I clear the car, start it, let it idle for about 30 seconds, maybe while I'm pulling down my sunshades and everything, and then I start driving. The speed limit in my neighborhood is 25 miles an hour, so it's very easy to be gentle there. And then once I'm on a main road, I have a 2-mile drive at about 45 miles an hour to the interstate. I accelerate gently, then I drive the speed limit on the interstate. Again, accelerate gently. I don't give it the beans, as Sarah would say from Sarah in Tuned. No matter how badly I want to blast past someone or beat a traffic light, if you're in that much of a hurry, then you're probably mismanaging your time. I gotta kind of chuckle when I see a car with steam coming from its tailpipe. That's an indication that the engine isn't warmed up yet. And then they are blasting, the driver is blasting from stoplight to stoplight, from this ramp to this ramp. It's got to be first to the traffic light, first to the intersection, first to the light or to the entrance ramp. First, got to be there. And I think they're the people who eventually have problems with their cars sooner than necessary, and that's assuming that they don't sell the car beforehand. Anyway, I drive gently until both the coolant and oil temperatures are above 180 degrees. By then, it would seem that the engine is thermally stable. I don't know if that's an actual physics term, but it seems to me that if everything in the engine is warmed up to 180 degrees, then everything should be pretty even. And at that point, the engine is ready to do what it's made to do. Let it rip at that point. Next, I keep up with prescribed maintenance, even the seemingly long 10,000-mile oil drains. And yeah, my car is modified and it would seem to need more frequent maintenance, but I still drive it in a fairly stock manner most of the time. I replace fluids and filters on time, and I use quality parts. So don't take your car to the cheapest place in town, Quick Lubes and places like that. Some cars fare well on the cheap stuff or during periods of neglect. Volkswagens and other German makes do not. They're not forgiving if you slack up on maintenance. If you lack the time or money to maintain the car as prescribed with the proper fluids, then get a Toyota. Your wallet will thank you. The car will tolerate it better. Finally, keep your car clean and perform routine visual inspections. Clean engine bays, wheel wells, and underbodies make small fluid leaks easier to discover before they're more significant. Fix those small problems before they become big ones. If something needs replacing, buy quality parts and buy them before a part fails if you can. I found my coolant leak when the leak was a small problem before a catastrophic failure. That saved me from a huge problem. Now, I often buy parts from the dealer, and in some cases, I think they're simply better parts, albeit more expensive. But at least buy parts that are made by an OE maker. These parts are made by the same manufacturers as OEM. They just don't have the Volkswagen Audi brand label stamped on them. Places like Deutsche Auto Parts, Autohaus AZ, and FCP Euro come to mind as good sources of OE parts. Your local auto parts store? Not so much. They're likely to carry the cheapest stuff that you can install. And those cheap parts, will they last? Well, I say buy once, cry once. Whatever you do, don't buy crap for your car, regardless of its brand. Bonus tip, stay stock. And yeah, that's a weird piece of advice coming from someone who's modified his car, but I think at least some of our problems are often found near our mods. Now, I'm not saying that the mods cause the problem, only that they might contribute to extra wear. Automotive engineers they're pretty smart and have designed our cars with longevity in mind. And emissions, fuel economy, and comfort as well, which is why the power is drawn back in the car, right? Sits up high like a 4x4. But everything you modify is something that's no longer operating within its design parameters. And yes, my boosted Stage 3 car is pushing some limits maybe. I tell myself that it's okay since I don't use the extra power very often, but it's still a risk. I don't lower my car, but if you do, is your car lowered to the point to where the control arms are inverted instead of like this or even like this? Now they're like this. Or perhaps you have excessive camber. Well, if you do, then that's outside the normal parameters. Plan for problems in the long term. In other words, save up for premature tire wear and maybe some strut failures. And that can happen if you keep your car long enough. Given my heavy electrical load, I expect to run through batteries and maybe even alternators more often. I have 150,000 miles on the original alternator, so perhaps it's not really a problem. I could go on with examples all day, but I think you get the point. Back to reliability, I said it in a previous video, even a $5,000 repair is cheaper than replacing the car. Once the car is fixed, it's fixed and then less expensive than buying something newer. I will very likely change my tune if something catastrophic happens, crank walk, or if I experience a cascade of problems. Right now, I'm enjoying the car, so until all of that happens, drive more, worry less. So what do you think? Is your Volkswagen reliable? Do my tips make any sense? Am I driving a ticking time bomb? Perhaps I'm just a few miles away from financial heartbreak and lots of tears. Comment below. As always, I appreciate you being here, and I will see you next time. Take care.